It was exactly 3 a.m. when the knock came. Not loud, not rushed, just slow and deliberate, as if whoever stood outside knew I was awake and waiting. The house was completely silent, the kind of silence that only exists deep in the night when even the walls seem to be asleep. My heart skipped because no one knocks on a door at 3 a.m., especially not on Christmas. I held my breath, listening, hoping it was just my imagination. Then it came again. Knock. Heavier this time. Closer. My chest tightened as 100 thoughts crashed into my mind. Neighbors' Auntie visit at this hour. Deliveries don't come in the dark, and Christmas pranksters don't move this carefully. I stood frozen, staring at the front door like it might open on its own. Christmas lights from the tree flickered softly behind me, casting long shadows across the living room. Normally, this night would have been filled with laughter, late dinners, and warmth. But this year felt different, too quiet, too empty. I hadn't even gone to bed yet. My mind restless with memories I didn't want to revisit. The streets outside were dark, no cars passing, no voices, no footsteps, just that door, separating me from whatever was standing on the other side. I slowly moved closer, my pulse pounding in my ears, and pressed my eye against the peephole. That's when I saw it. A red coat. White trim. A familiar shape that made no sense at all. Santa. Standing on my porch at 3 a.m. My hands began to shake as one thought echoed through my mind. Christmas miracles, aren't he supposed to feel this terrifying? The knock still echoed in my head as I unlocked the door, every instinct screaming that this was a mistake. Cold air rushed inside the moment the door cracked open, carrying with it the sharp smell of winter and something else: old fabric, damp wool, maybe even ash. He stood there under the porch light, taller than I expected, shoulders slightly hunched as if the weight of the night pressed down on him. The red coat looked real, not a cheap costume, its color deep and worn, the white trim no longer bright but yellowed with age. A long beard covered most of his face, tangled and uneven, moving slightly with each slow breath he took. For a second, I couldn't speak. My mind searched desperately for logic, for some explanation that didn't involve fear. He didn't smile. That was the first thing that felt wrong. His eyes, shadowed beneath the hat, were dark and hollow, reflecting the porch light like glass. He held something in his gloved hands, a small sack, slumped and heavy, as if filled with things that didn't belong to this night. I swallowed hard and asked who he was, my voice barely louder than a whisper. He tilted his head, studying me, and when he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough, like it hadn't been used in a very long time. He said my name, not loudly, not kindly, just enough to let me know this wasn't a guess. My stomach dropped. I had never seen this man before, yet he knew me. He took one slow step forward. And instinctively I stepped back. The wooden floor creaking beneath my feet, he didn't cross the threshold. Instead, he lifted a finger and pointed behind me, toward the glowing Christmas tree in the corner of the room. He asked if I had been good this year. The words should have sounded playful, even ridiculous. But they landed like a verdict. My mind raced through memories I tried to bury, arguments I regretted, promises I broke, moments I wished I could erase. I didn't answer, and the silence between us grew thick and heavy. The lights on the tree flickered suddenly, dimming, then brightening again. His eyes followed the flicker, and for the first time, something like sadness crossed his face. He said Christmas used to mean something, that it was once about warmth, forgiveness, and second chances. Now, he said, it was just noise. Just lies wrapped in ribbons. As he spoke, the air around him seemed colder, the warmth from inside the house fading inch by inch. My breath fogged in front of me, and I realized my hands were numb. He reached into the sack and pulled out a small, neatly wrapped box. The paper was old-fashioned, brown and tied with twine instead of ribbon. He held it out toward me but didn't let go. He said this gift wasn't something you open, it was something you face. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse. I asked him what he wanted. His answer came slowly, deliberately. He said he wanted me to remember. Remember the night I stopped believing. Remember the moment I turned away when someone needed me most. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind me, making me jump. When I looked back at him, his smile had finally appeared, but it wasn't warm or joyful. It was thin and knowing, as if this was only the beginning. He loosened his grip on the box and let it fall into my hands. The weight of it felt wrong, heavier than it should have been. As I looked down, the porch light flickered, and when it steadied again, I realized with a chill creeping up my spine that he hadn't knocked to give me a gift. He had come to collect something instead. The box felt colder the longer I held it, as if it were drawing heat straight from my palms. I closed the door slowly, never taking my eyes off it, and slid the deadbolt into place. The house seemed different now, smaller, tighter, like the walls had crept closer while I wasn't looking. The Christmas tree lights hummed softly, casting long, trembling shadows across the floor. I stood there for a full minute, listening for footsteps on the porch, another knock, anything. There was nothing. Only my own breathing, shallow and uneven. I carried the box to the table and set it down carefully, as if it might explode. The twine was rough, digging into my fingers when I tried to untie it. My hands shook, not from the cold anymore, but from a growing sense that opening it would change something I couldn't undo. I told myself this was ridiculous. Someone had played a cruel prank. A disturbed stranger in a costume. That was all. But deep down, I knew better. He had known my name. He had known things no stranger should. When the twine finally loosened, the paper fell away to reveal a small wooden lid. No tag. No message. Just my reflection staring back at me in the polished surface pail, wide-eyed, afraid. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside was an old cassette tape and a yellowed photograph tucked beneath it. I didn't need to pick it up to know what it was. My chest tightened as recognition hit me like a blow. The photograph showed two children sitting on a snow-covered curb, bundled in coats far too thin for winter. One of them was me. The other was a boy I hadn't thought about in years. His name rose in my mind like a ghost I had tried to bury. We had been neighbours once, poor, forgotten, invisible. That Christmas, my family had everything: warmth, food. Gifts stacked high beneath the tree. His family had nothing. The cassette tape rattled softly as my hand brushed against it. Written on the label in faded ink were 3 words: Christmas night. 1999. My throat went dry. I owned an old player somewhere, buried in a box in the closet. I told myself I didn't have to listen. I could throw it away, pretend this never happened. But my feet were already moving, carrying me down the hallway as if I had no choice. When the tape clicked into place and the player whirred to life, a low hiss filled the room. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then a child's voice cut through, thin, trembling, unmistakably frightened. It was his voice. He was crying, asking if anyone was there, if anyone could hear him. In the background, I could hear wind howling and something else, knocking. The sound sent a chill down my spine. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the floor as the recording continued. He talked about being cold. About waiting. About seeing lights on in my house across the street and being too scared to knock again after I told him to go home earlier that night. I remembered it now with awful clarity. He had stood at our door, eyes red, hands shaking. My parents were busy. I was embarrassed. I told him Santa didn't come to kids who begged. The tape ended with silence. Long, empty silence that felt heavier than any sound. I sat there long after it stopped, staring at the dark window where my reflection looked back at me, older but no less afraid. That was when I understood. The man at the door hadn't come to scare me. He had come to make me listen. The box sat on the table like it was alive, its presence changing the air around it. I tried to ignore it, pacing the living room instead, but every step seemed to circle back to that small brown package. The house felt different now, quieter than before, as if even the walls were listening. Outside, the wind had died down, and the snow fell gently, deceptively peaceful. I told myself the man was just a stranger, a disturbed person playing some cruel joke. Yet my hand still trembled, and my name, spoken in his voice, echoed in my head again and again. Finally, I sat down and untied the twine. The knot came loose too easily, like it wanted to be opened. Inside was not what I expected. No toy. No letter. Just an old cassette tape and a small folded note. I stared at them, confusion mixing with dread. Who even used cassette tapes anymore? The note was yellowed, the edges worn soft. When I unfolded it, my breath caught. The handwriting was familiar. Painfully familiar. It was mine. The note was dated years ago, back when life felt simpler, back when Christmas meant laughter instead of silence. I had written it to someone I loved deeply, someone I promised I would never abandon. My chest tightened as memory after memory flooded back. Late-night arguments. Words spoken in anger. A final slammed door. I had convinced myself that time healed everything, that moving on meant forgetting. But holding that note proved how wrong I was. I noticed the cassette had a label written in the same hand, Christmas night. My pulse quickened as I searched through drawers until I found an old player I hadn't thrown away for reasons I never questioned. When I pressed play, the tape hissed softly before a voice emerged. My voice, younger, warmer, full of hope. I was laughing, talking about decorating the tree, about how next Christmas would be better. About how family was all that mattered. Then another voice joined in. Softer, tired. A voice I hadn't heard in years. The person I left behind. The room felt like it was shrinking as the recording continued, capturing a moment I had buried deep inside myself. There was a pause on the tape, followed by crying. Real broken sobs. I felt my own eyes burn as I listened, unable to stop it. This wasn't a memory meant to comfort, it was a reminder of a promise broken. Suddenly, the tape stopped on its own. The player clicked loudly, the sound jolting me back to the present. That's when I noticed the reflection in the dark TV screen. I wasn't alone anymore. My heart nearly stopped as I slowly turned around. He was standing by the tree, exactly where he had pointed earlier. Santa. Or whatever he truly was. I hadn't heard the door open. I hadn't heard footsteps. He looked at me with something close to disappointment. He said this was the part most people hated, the remembering. He told me he wasn't there to punish, not really. He was there because forgotten promises have a way of screaming the loudest on Christmas night. The lights on the tree dimmed again, and ornaments rattled softly, as if the house itself was reacting to his words. He asked me a single question, his voice calm but heavy. If I could go back to that night, would I choose differently? My throat tightened, and I realized the answer terrified me, not because I didn't know it, but because I did, as the clock on the wall ticked closer to morning. I understood that the knock at my door wasn't the beginning of the nightmare, it was the moment I was finally forced to face the truth I had been running from all along. The house felt different after he disappeared, as if the walls themselves had leaned closer to listen. I stood frozen in the doorway for a long time, the cold box still clutched against my chest, afraid that if I moved too fast the night would punish me for it. Outside, the street was empty. No footprints in the thin layer of frost, no redcoat fading into the dark, no sound of footsteps walking away. It was as if Santa, if that's what he truly was, had never been there at all. Slowly, I closed the door and locked it, sliding down against it until I was sitting on the floor, breathing hard, trying to steady my shaking hands. The box felt warmer now, almost alive. I carried it to the living room and set it on the coffee table beneath the Christmas lights. The tree flickered again, then steadied, casting soft colours across the walls. For a moment, everything looked normal, peaceful even. And that somehow terrified me more. And then, slowly, the pictures changed. Faces disappeared, smiles faded, the rooms grew emptier, until the last few pages showed only me, standing alone beside a tree that looked much like the one glowing in front of me now. Something slipped out from between the final pages and landed softly on the table. A small note, folded once. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was familiar, my mother's. The words were simple, written years ago. If you ever feel alone, remember that love doesn't leave. People do. My vision blurred as tears finally spilled over. I hadn't cried like this in years, not since the night I decided it hurt too much to remember, so I stopped trying. The clock on the wall chimed softly, 3:33 a.m. The same hour Santa had knocked. I looked up, half expecting to see him standing there again, but the room was empty. Instead, I felt something else, an understanding settling deep in my chest. He hadn't come to punish me. He hadn't come to scare me. He had come to remind me of what I had buried to survive. The love I shut out. The grief I never faced. The belief that Christmas was just another night, because believing otherwise hurt too much. I placed the album back inside the box and closed it gently. The cold in the room faded, replaced by a quiet warmth that had nothing to do with the heater clicking on outside. Faint snow began to fall, soft and steady, covering the street in white. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the need to turn away from the window. I stood there and watched, letting the silence wrap around me without fear. Somewhere deep inside, I felt certain of one thing: Santa wouldn't be knocking again. He didn't need to. He had delivered what I needed most, not a gift, not a warning, but a memory powerful enough to bring me back to myself. And as Christmas night finally slipped into morning, I whispered a quiet promise to the empty room to remember, to forgive, and to never again pretend that I was truly alone. The door was closed. The night was quiet again, and yet everything felt different. The house no longer felt empty. But it didn't feel safe either. The clock on the wall ticked forward, announcing that Christmas morning had arrived, but the warmth people talk about never came back. I stood there for a long time, staring at the place where he had stood, realizing that some visits aren't meant to bring joy, they're meant to wake us up. Santa didn't come with laughter or gifts. He came with a reminder that every choice we make leaves a mark. And some nights arrive only to make us face the truth we've been running from. If this story made you pause, if it sent a chill down your spine or stirred something deep inside you, then it has done its job. Stories like this aren't just meant to scare, they're meant to stay with you long after the night is over. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more dark, emotional, and mysterious stories like this. Like the video, share it with someone who loves late-night storytelling. And comment below, do you think he was really Santa or something far older and darker? Stay with us, because some knocks in the night are never random. And some stories are waiting just outside the door.